They came in the dead of night, no lights, no radios, no mercy. The Germans called them Nachthexen, the night witches. Imagine the eerie whine of canvas biplanes slicing through the darkness, engines cut, gliding silently over enemy lines, then the sudden whistle of falling bombs. It was psychological warfare at its finest, carried out by women. This is the untold story of the all-female Soviet 588 Night Bomber Regiment. Young women barely in their 20s, flying wooden planes meant for training, not combat. But against all odds, they became one of the most feared air units of World War II. Tonight we step into the moonlit skies of the Eastern Front, where courage had no gender and fear had a name, the Night Witches. Let's rewind to 1941. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union has unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a brutal assault stretching across thousands of miles. The Red Army is desperate, bleeding men and machines, and for the first time, the Soviet government considers something radical, allowing women into frontline combat roles. One woman in particular, Marina Raskova, a record-breaking aviator and national hero, pushes for it. She convinces Stalin himself to authorize 3 all-female air regiments, among them the 588th. The recruits? Teenage girls and young women from every corner of the USSR, students, teachers, farmers, some barely old enough to drive, now training to fly at night, drop bombs, and survive German anti-aircraft fire. Their planes? The Po-2, a flimsy biplane made of wood and canvas, open cockpit, no armor, no parachutes at first, and top speed slower than a car. But that very weakness becomes their strength. Too slow for the enemy's radar to detect, too light for anti-aircraft guns to track. They flew low, silent and deadly. The Germans hated them, couldn't catch them, couldn't sleep because of them. And every time they heard that faint whoosh in the dark, they knew witches were near. But these weren't supernatural beings. They were determined, brilliant, fearless women, turning the tide of war one bombing run at a time. Their mission was simple: disrupt supply lines, destroy camps, demoralize the enemy. Their courage? Unmatched. Their losses? Heartbreaking. But through it all, they forged a legacy of defiance and fire. This is where their story begins. Training was a nightmare. Not because they weren't tough, but because they had everything stacked against them. Imagine stepping into a freezing airfield with threadbare uniforms, meant for men 3 sizes too big, boots stuffed with rags, and planes so old the paint peeled off in the cold. The Po-2 biplane had no cockpit glass, just an open windscreen, so every night flight turned into a battle against frostbite and exhaustion. Yet they laughed through the pain, naming their planes, sharing songs, carving out camaraderie in the darkness. Their commander, Yevdokia Bershanskaya, ran a tight unit, discipline, precision. But their spiritual anchor was Marina Raskova, their hero, their symbol. She believed in them when no one else did. The male pilots mocked them, called them little girls playing war. But soon those laughs would turn to awe. After months of grueling training, the 588th was deployed to the front, the Caucasus Mountains, 1942. Their first mission came under a moonless sky. 3 crews took off in formation, engines sputtering in the cold night. No radios, no lights, just courage and a compass. As they approached enemy lines, searchlights suddenly swept across the clouds, then gunfire. Traces ripped through the sky like fiery serpents. Their orders were clear: drop bombs, turn and vanish. They cut their engines mid-flight, gliding silently over the target, hearts pounding, the sound of the wind the only thing between them and death. Then, release. The bombs fell true, igniting supply depots and roaring flames. The Germans panicked, firing wildly into the night at ghosts they couldn't see. The witches had struck, and by the time the enemy realized what had happened, they were gone, engines roaring back to life, disappearing into the black horizon. When they landed, hands trembling, frostbitten and half frozen, they were no longer rookies. They were warriors. Word spread fast across the front. The night witches had arrived. Each night, more missions, dozens, then hundreds. Sometimes up to 8 sorties a night, barely sleeping, loading their own bombs, patching their own planes. They flew through storms, fog, bullets, and fear, and every successful raid added another whisper to their legend. The Germans began dreading the dark. Officers offered iron crosses to anyone who could shoot them down. But these witches were too clever, flying in pairs, one as decoy, the other as the silent shadow. They used the night as their cloak, the wind as their ally, and in that eerie stillness before the bombs fell, soldiers swore they heard broomsticks. But what they really heard was destiny. By 1943, the Night Witches had become legends whispered across battlefields. Their missions grew deadlier, the stakes higher. They flew through walls of fire, over mountains shrouded in fog, through anti-aircraft hellstorms so bright they turned night into day. Their old biplanes, stitched together with tape and hope, carried them into the jaws of death, again and again. Every sortie was a gamble, and they knew it. Some never returned. One by one, sisters in arms vanished into the dark, their final flight swallowed by silence. But the others pressed on, their grief turning into fuel, their courage harder than steel. They flew without parachutes to save weight, their pockets stuffed with tools and maps instead of rations. They became ghosts of the sky, seen only in flashes, heard only in whispers. The Germans dreaded the faint hum of their engines, that eerie cut of silence before the bombs fell, like witches sweeping down on broomsticks. And so the name stuck, Nachthexen, the Night Witches. But behind the legend were young women, some barely 20, whose laughter echoed through cold tents, who wrote love letters by candlelight, who patched bullet holes with trembling hands and took off again before dawn. They flew over the Kuban, the Crimea, the Taman Peninsula, hundreds of missions, thousands of bombs dropped. In 1944, they shattered records, over 24,000 sorties flown, each one abrush with death. When the war finally ended, the 588th was one of the most decorated units in the Soviet Air Force. 23 Night Witches were named heroes of the Soviet Union. Yet when they returned home, many faded into obscurity. Medals tucked away, stories untold. The world moved on, but their courage didn't fade. It burned. In the pages of history, in the hearts of every woman who dared to defy expectations. They proved that bravery knows no gender, that even with the humblest tools, the fiercest spirits can change the tide of war. The Night Witches didn't just fight battles. They rewrote what it meant to be a soldier, a woman, a hero. And though the skies are quiet now, if you listen closely, on a moonless night, you might still hear the faint whisper of wings and the echo of witches who refuse to fear the dark.